63 years on this earth. Built a company from $4,000 and a handshake. Buried a wife. Raised 4 children. Outlasted 2 recessions, 1 lawsuit, and a tax audit that lasted longer than some of my friendships. Nobody in 63 years had ever spoken to me the way my son did on that Tuesday night in November. Not a stranger, not a competitor, not even the IRS. And those people have no manners whatsoever. My own blood. Standing in the hallway of the house I helped him buy. In the city I moved to specifically so I could be close to him, pointing his finger at me like I was a problem he'd been putting off solving. I want you to understand something before this story goes any further. I am not a dramatic man. I don't raise my voice. I don't make scenes. I was raised by a man who believed that the loudest person in any room was almost always the weakest one, and I have carried that like a compass my entire life. What I am is patient. And on the night of November 12th, 9:47 p.m., Columbus, Ohio, my patience ran out. Not loudly. That's not how it works with men like me. Quietly. Like a door closing on something that will never be the same. The clock in the hallway was ticking. It's a brass clock. Antique. Corrine picked it out at a market in Savannah 17 years ago, held it up with both hands in the middle of a crowded aisle, and said, "Nolan, this one. This is the one." I didn't understand it then. I understood it at her funeral when I carried it out of the house in Cincinnati and put it in the back of my car, because I couldn't leave it behind. That clock goes where I go. It was ticking in that hallway while my son pointed his finger at me. And the sound of it, steady, indifferent, continuing no matter what, was the thing that kept me from saying anything I'd regret. I'd been living with Sloan for 8 months. 8 months since a doctor sat down across from me with the careful expression doctors get when they're about to change your day. "Moderate cardiac episode," he said, with the tone of a man who'd delivered bad news often enough to have developed a specific voice for it, and suggested gently but firmly that living alone wasn't the right call for a while. 8 months since Sloan had stood in that hospital room, my firstborn, 38 years old, broad-shouldered, with his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, and said without hesitation, "Dad, come stay with us. We have the room. It's no problem at all." 8 months of learning, slowly and then all at once, exactly what kind of problem I was. It started in the kitchen. It always starts in the kitchen. I was making chamomile tea, the kind Corinne used to make me when I couldn't sleep. She'd bring it in without being asked, set it on the nightstand, and go back to her book without a word. The smell of it still does something to me I haven't entirely figured out how to describe. I heard Sloane's footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate, the footsteps of a man who has talked himself into something. "Dad." He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "We need to talk." "Sure," I said. Didn't turn around. "Tea's almost ready. You want some?" "No." A pause that had rehearsal in it. "This is serious." I turned around. Sloan was at the bottom of the stairs with his jaw set and his eyes not quite meeting mine. The specific expression of someone who has been told what to say and is concentrating on remembering it correctly. And behind him, at the edge of the hallway where the kitchen light just barely reached, was Alara, my daughter-in-law, arms crossed. That particular stillness she had, not passive, never passive, watchful. The stillness of someone monitoring a situation they've engineered. She'd been in my son's life for 3 years, married too. In that time, with the patience and precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, she had, very quietly, very gradually, moved every important person out of Sloane's orbit. Not dramatically, never dramatically, just a slow, clean disappearance, an unreturned call here, a missed dinner there, an offhand comment in the right ear at the right moment. The kind of thing that by the time anyone noticed had been going on so long it felt like it had always been that way. I had watched all of it, documented all of it, 22 months of documentation, 47 pages in a manila folder in the drawer of the guest room upstairs. But I hadn't moved. Not yet. I was waiting for her to overplay her hand. She had just overplayed her hand. "Okay," I said, setting down my mug. "Talk." What Sloan said next, I won't sanitize it. There is no version of this story where I make it softer than it was because it wasn't soft. "Get out of this house." His voice hit the walls. The clock ticked. "My wife isn't comfortable. Pack your things and be gone by morning." I looked at my son. Then I looked at Alara. She was doing everything in her power not to smile wide enough to show it. Almost, her face said. Almost done. I said nothing. Not a single word. Sloan blinked. He'd prepared for this conversation. Prepared for pushback. For argument, for the wounded father speech that ends with hugging and someone apologizing. That's the thing about people who rehearse confrontations. They write both sides of the script. When you don't deliver your lines, they have no idea what to do with themselves. Dad, did you hear me? I heard you, I said. I picked up my chamomile tea, walked past both of them, went to the guest room and closed the door. Let me tell you something about silence that most people get wrong. They see a quiet man and read it as surrender, broken, finished, done. What they don't understand is that some men go quiet the same way a storm goes quiet, right before it takes the roof off. I lay in that bed, the guest bed with the mattress that felt like sleeping on an opinion, and the window that rattled every time the wind shifted. And I didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't replay the scene with better comebacks. I made a list, the way I always did before a significant business move. What do I have? What do they think I have? What is the gap between those two things? The gap, as it turned out, was approximately $12 million wide. Here is what Sloan knew about his father. Retired, widower, heart condition, drove a 2019 Camry, wore the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation, made chamomile tea at night and fell asleep watching westerns. Here is what Alara had decided about his father. Sometime in the 2 years she'd been quietly reshaping my son's understanding of who I was. Burden, liability, old man bleeding Sloan dry, problem to be solved. Here is what neither of them knew. In 1987, a 24-year-old named Nolan Drake took $4,000 in Cincinnati and an idea that every sensible person told him wouldn't work, and turned it into a regional logistics company that he ran for 19 years before selling it for a number that made his accountant need to sit down. Reinvested quietly, lived modestly, because Corinne and I had both come from nothing and never stopped knowing what that felt like. Raised 4 children, sent them all to college, built a land trust on 200 acres of Ohio farmland, acquired a minority stake in a mid-size investment group called Meridian, and never, not once in 63 years, felt the need to explain any of it to anyone. Corinne used to tell me, Nolan, you should let people know what you've built. And I'd say, why? So they treat me differently? I'd rather know how they treat me when they think I'm nobody. She'd laugh every time I said it. Lord, I miss that laugh. What I'd learned in 6 decades was this. The people worth keeping in your life don't need your net worth to treat you with dignity. The ones who do, that information is more useful as a diagnostic than a credential. Alara had just failed the diagnostic. Comprehensively, around 2 a.m. I got up, moved to the desk in the corner of the guest room, opened my laptop, and called Everett, my attorney of 22 years, former partner at a Columbus firm, the man who had drafted every contract, every trust document, every deed I'd ever signed, and who answered his phone at 2 a.m. with the specific tone of a man who had been doing exactly that for 2 decades and had made peace with it. Nolan. Gravel and composure. It's 2 in the morning. I know, I said. I need you to move on the foundation. A beat. How soon? Dawn. A longer beat. How bad was it? I looked at Corinne's clock. I'd carried it from the hallway to my nightstand the day I moved in. Couldn't leave it out there for just anyone to walk past. Bad enough, I said. Start with the land trust. The 200 acres. Then the Meridian stake. Then, Everett, call the others. The others were 3 phone numbers I hadn't dialed myself in close to 2 years. My second son in Portland, my daughter outside Austin, my youngest, Marcus, 40 minutes south in Circleville, the one who had his mother's laugh and my stubbornness, which is honestly the most dangerous combination I've ever encountered. 3 children who had, one by one, quietly disappeared from the picture. No dramatic falling out, no blow-up that anyone could point to, just a slow fade, engineered so gradually that by the time any of us noticed the distance, it felt like it had always been there. That's how Alara worked, always had. Consider it done, Everett said. Then, Nolan, where are you going to go? I looked at the clock, listened to it tick. Somewhere I should have gone a long time ago, I said. By 5:30 a.m., I had one suitcase on the bed. The important things. Corinne's clock, wrapped in a flannel shirt, tucked at the top. One photograph. My laptop. And the manila folder, 47 pages, 22 months of dates and details, and one recorded phone call that was about to become very relevant. I didn't slam the door on the way out. I didn't leave a note on a pillow. I did leave one thing. A plain white envelope on the kitchen table. On the front, as a label, I'd used Corinne's handwriting from a card she'd sent me years ago. I'd carried that piece of paper in my wallet since her funeral. I taped it to the front of the envelope, smoothed it flat with my thumb, and left it where Sloane would find it. Not immediately, not that morning, later, when it was already too late to change what was coming. I pulled the front door shut behind me into the gray Columbus morning. The Camry started on the first turn. I backed out of the driveway slowly without looking back. $12 million. A plan. And absolutely nothing left to prove to anyone. Nobody tells you what freedom feels like at 63. I'll spare you the poetry. It feels like the first full breath after 8 months underwater. Your chest opens, your shoulders drop 2 inches. You realize how long you've been holding yourself in a shape that wasn't yours. Wednesday, 6:14 a.m. I checked into the Meridian House Hotel on Nationwide Boulevard, with one suitcase, a coffee from the lobby cart, and the specific calm of a man who has made his decision and is done revisiting it. Room 1104. 11th floor, a mattress that felt like it had been assembled by someone who actually respected the human spine. I unpacked one thing first. Corinne's clock. Nightstand. Centered. Plugged in. Listened to it tick. There we go, I thought. That's the sound of a room becoming mine. At 7 a.m., Everett called. It's done, he said, before I could speak. All of it? Land trust transferred to the Corinne Drake Foundation at 5:52 a.m. The Meridian stake redirected effective this morning. And a pause, the kind Everett uses when he's about to say the part he enjoyed most. Sloane is no longer the primary beneficiary on the life insurance policy. As of 6:08 a.m., I looked out the window at Columbus waking up cold and gray and completely indifferent. Good, I said. Make the calls. Now, before I tell you what Everett found when he made those calls, I need to stop here for just a moment. Because if you are watching this on Dad's Sweet Revenge and you haven't subscribed yet, I need you to do something for me. Nolan Drake has been quiet for 22 months. He has been patient and careful and completely deliberately invisible. And what is about to happen? The calls Everett made, what Marcus said when he answered, what my daughter in Austin said, what happened when Sloane finally opened that envelope, is the part of this story that I think about when someone asks me why I believe that patience, actual patience, is the most underrated weapon a person can carry. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. Do it right now while Everett is on the phone and Corinne's clock is ticking in room 1104. And then drop me a comment. Tell me where you're watching this from. City, state, country. Wherever you are right now in the world. This story started in a Columbus hallway at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and I genuinely want to know how far it's traveled. Someone out there is watching this and thinking about their own family, their own envelope on a kitchen table, their own brass clock on a nightstand. Maybe that's you. Tell me where you are. We'll go back to Everett's calls in just a second. The calls went to 3 numbers. Everett told me afterward what each of them said when they picked up. He's a man of discretion. Doesn't repeat things he isn't asked to repeat. But I'd asked him to tell me. I needed to know. My son in Portland answered on the second ring, heard Everett's name and said, "Is Dad okay?" That was the first thing out of his mouth. Not what does he want or why is an attorney calling me at 5 a.m. Just, is Dad okay? My daughter in Austin let Everett finish his entire explanation before she said a single word. Then she said, "It's about time." Quietly, like someone who'd been waiting for a door to open. And Marcus, my youngest, 40 minutes south in Circleville, the one with his mother's laugh, had gone completely silent for a long moment, then said, "Tell him I'm on the next flight." He drove. 40 minutes. He was there by Thursday morning. I had to set my coffee down when Everett told me that last part. Just sat on the edge of the hotel bed and set it down and didn't say anything for a moment. 3 children I hadn't spoken to properly in 2 years. 3 voices that answered at 6 a.m. like no time had passed at all. That tells you something about what was actually lost, and what was still there, intact, waiting. Wednesday passed. Thursday, too. I walked along the Scioto River Thursday afternoon with my hands in my coat pockets, the cold coming off the water the way Ohio cold does in November, patient and thorough, finding every gap in your jacket. I thought about Corinne. She'd hated conflict, genuinely, physically hated it, the way some people hate the sound of certain music. She would have hated the legal maneuvering, the frozen accounts, the attorney calls at dawn. She would have said there had to be another way. But she also said something else. 3 years ago, first Thanksgiving with Elara, we were in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, and the rest of the house was loud with conversation. And Corinne had turned to me with a dish towel in her hands and said in that quiet, certain voice she saved for things she knew absolutely, "Nolan, watch that one. Just that. Just watch." I had watched. For 22 months I had watched and noted and documented every deflection, every manufactured distance, every small, quiet cruelty served cold and called normal. The manila folder I'd packed had 47 pages in it now, and one recording. Ohio is a single-party consent state, meaning one person in a conversation can legally record it. In the spring of last year, Elara had a phone call in the kitchen while she thought I was in the backyard. The kitchen window was open. I was on the back porch. I heard her say, "He's a senile old man, bleeding Sloan dry. I'm handling it." I went inside and got my phone. I handled it too. Friday morning, Sloan called. I let it ring. He called 3 more times before noon. Each time I set the phone face down and went back to whatever I was doing, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Some things need room to breathe before they can be spoken about. Some reckonings need time to land before they can become conversations. Let him begin to understand the size of what shifted. What Sloan was only just starting to discover was the architecture Everett and I had built, quietly, over several years, that made the business account he'd borrowed from twice last year not just a breach of trust, but a structural problem. A silent clause in the operating agreement, inserted in 2019, made the entire structure contingent on my active participation. I was no longer participating. Everett called Friday afternoon. His attorney requested an urgent meeting. What about? The land trust. The stake. The account suspension. What did you tell them? Everett paused. The specific pause of a man who was about to say something he enjoyed composing. That you were unavailable this week, but that you wished Sloan well. First real laugh in days, the kind that comes from your chest. Corinne would have loved Everett. Saturday morning, Marcus knocked on the door of room 1104. He was carrying 2 coffees from the place on High Street, the old diner I used to take all 4 kids on Saturday mornings when they were young, before the table needed 2 leaves in it to fit everyone. He looked like me more than any of the others. Same build, same way of standing in a doorway like he isn't entirely sure he's been invited. "You didn't have to drive up," I said. "I know," he said. We sat on the edge of the beds, hotel furniture, nothing memorable, and drank our coffees. Neither of us said anything for a while. That's the Drake way. It used to confuse Corinne until she realized it wasn't awkwardness. It's just how we talk about the things that matter most, slowly, carefully, with a lot of space around each word. Finally, Marcus said, "She called me, about a year ago." He was looking at his cup. "Told me you'd said things, that I was the difficult one, the disappointment of the family." He turned the cup in his hands. I almost believed her. The best lies rhyme with your existing fears. I'd been turning that over in my mind for weeks. That's how she did it. Didn't invent things from nothing. Took whatever doubt already lived in a person and made it just slightly louder. "I never said any of that," I told him. "I know that now." I reached into the nightstand, took out the document Everett had couriered Thursday morning, set it on the bed between us. Marcus read it slowly. I watched him read it. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, the particular wet of a man who is refusing to cry and succeeding through sheer stubbornness. "Dad, it's yours," I said. "Yours, your brother's, your sister's. Equal. The way it always should have been." He didn't say anything. He just nodded once, the way men do when they've run out of words but need to acknowledge that something real just happened. 3 miles away, In the house on the Bexley Street with the rattling window, Sloane had finally come downstairs, stood in the kitchen, looked at the envelope on the table. He'd been walking past it for 4 days. Saturday night, he picked it up. Let me tell you what was in that envelope. Not the legal documents. Those were separate, delivered through Everett's office. The envelope on the kitchen table held something else entirely. 4 pages, handwritten on hotel stationery from a business trip I'd taken to Louisville the year before. I've been carrying those blank pages in my laptop bag for months, the way you carry something you know you'll eventually need. I wrote Sloane the truth, all of it, in order, with dates. November 14th, 2 years ago, the first time Alara told Sloane that I'd complained about their marriage to a neighbor on Elm Street. The neighbor's name was apparently Patricia. I have never in my life spoken to a woman named Patricia on Elm Street. I have never spoken to anyone on Elm Street about my son's marriage. I wrote that down, with the date, February the following year, when my daughter called Sloane in tears because she'd been told by Alara, through Sloane, that I'd said she was jealous of their lifestyle, that I'd called her difficult. I had never said anything remotely close to that. My daughter and I had spoken on the phone 3 days earlier about her herb garden and a book she was reading. I wrote that down, with the date, April, when Marcus stopped receiving invitations to Sunday dinners without explanation. Just stopped. No conversation about it. No falling out. He called me once asking if he'd done something wrong. I didn't know what to tell him because I didn't know yet what had been said. I wrote that down anyway. Filed it. July. The phone call. The window open. Her voice crystal clear on my recording. He's a senile old man bleeding Sloane dry. I'm handling it. I wrote that down, and I told him the recording existed, and I told him that copies were already with Everett and with each of his siblings. And then I wrote the part I'd been carrying the longest. 3 weeks before Corinne died, in a hospital room in Cincinnati that smelled like antiseptic and yellow flowers someone had brought, and she'd asked me moved to the windowsill because the smell was too sweet from the bed, she pulled me close. She wasn't afraid of dying. I want to be clear about that. My wife was one of the most clear-eyed people I have ever known, and she'd made her peace with what was coming in a way that I hadn't managed yet, and still haven't, entirely. But she was afraid of one thing. She held my hand, and she said, with the particular directness she reserved for things she needed me to actually hear, "Promise me you'll keep them together, Nolan. All 4 of them. No matter what happens after I'm gone. Promise me." I promised her. I wrote Sloane that I had failed that promise, not because I didn't try, but because I chose silence at every moment when I should have chosen truth. I chose to preserve a version of peace in one room while the house came apart around me. I chose to hope that things would correct themselves when I was the only person in that house with the information to correct them. I wrote that the foundation, the Corinne Drake Foundation, sitting on 200 acres of Ohio farmland and funded with what should have been his inheritance, existed because his mother's legacy deserved better than to become collateral in someone else's personal power game. I wrote that I loved him. I wrote that love and tolerance are not the same thing, and that I should have learned that distinction 22 months earlier. And I wrote, "Do not call me until you understand the difference." Everett called Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. Sloane's attorney withdrew the urgent meeting request. I set down my coffee. Why? Because Sloane fired him last night. A pause. And this morning, Alara moved out. The room went still. Say that again. She's staying with her sister in Worthington. Left last night with 2 suitcases. Apparently the recording was, Everett chose his words with the care of a man who respects language, a significant development in their household. 2 suitcases. I had left with 1. I sat with that for a moment. Not triumph. I want to be precise about that. Not satisfaction. Exactly. Something older and sadder than both of those things. The particular grief of a parent who has been right about something they desperately wanted to be wrong about. The grief of watching a thing you warned about come true anyway because you waited too long to say it out loud. She was never going to change. That was never the variable in this equation. Sunday afternoon, my daughter landed at John Glenn Airport. I met her in the lobby of the Meridian House. She came through the automatic doors with her mother's posture, shoulders back, unhurried, like a woman who has decided to be exactly wherever she is. And when she saw me across the lobby, she walked straight to me and didn't say a word. Just put her arms around me and held on. When she pulled back, she had Corinne's expression, the one that meant, I have things to say and I am choosing every word carefully so I don't actually set something on fire. I should have called more, she said. So should I said. We left it exactly there. Drake family way. Put the hard thing on the table, acknowledge it, and let it sit until it's ready to be picked up properly. We had dinner at a place on High Street. Real food. Her idea. She ordered for both of us without asking, the way her mother used to, and I didn't say a word about it. Monday morning, day 7. I was having breakfast, eggs, wheat toast, good orange juice, the hotel restaurant that had started recognizing my order, when my phone rang. Not Everett. Sloan. I looked at his name on the screen for a long time. Longer than I needed to. The clock on my nightstand upstairs, ticking the same tick it had ticked for 17 years. Corinne's voice in my memory, from a hospital room, from a promise. I answered. The voice on the other end was not the voice that had filled the Bexley hallway 8 nights ago. That voice had been sharp and rehearsed and cruel in the specific way of a man delivering someone else's lines. This voice was something entirely different. Hollow, stripped, small in the way that only real things are small. Not performed smallness, but the actual smallness of a person standing in a room where all the walls have come down at once. Dad. I know, I said. I didn't know about the calls. What she said to everyone. His voice broke on that last part. Not dramatically, just the way voices break when something real has finally reached them. I didn't know about the recording. Dad, I didn't know any of it. I know you didn't. That is the truest and most complicated part of this story. Sloan wasn't a villain. He was something almost harder to make sense of, a genuinely good man who had been turned slowly and expertly and with tremendous patience, like a key in a lock, until he was facing entirely the wrong direction. He wasn't cruel by nature. He'd been made cruel by proximity, by the drip, drip, drip of a voice in his ear, every day for 2 years revising his reality, one small increment at a time. I know you didn't, I said out loud. I'm sorry. The words came out without architecture, no strategy behind them, no performance, just a son stripped of everything, saying the only true thing he had left. Dad, I am so sorry. The clock ticked. I thought about Corinne, about a hospital room, about a promise made while she was still here to hear me make it. I thought about 4 kids at a diner on High Street, crowded around a table with 2 leaves in it, arguing about nothing important. I know, I said, but sorry is the beginning of something. It's not the thing itself. What got torn down took a long time to tear down. It's going to take longer to rebuild. Silence. Then, quietly, without any drama at all. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Not about the money, not the accounts or the foundation or the stake or any of it. Just tell me what to do. The most honest thing a person can say when they've lost something they didn't know they had until it was gone. Call Marcus, I said. Tonight, not tomorrow. Then call your brother in Portland. Then your sister. I paused. They answered at 6 a.m. when Everett called them. They'll answer for you. Okay. Then we'll talk. I did not promise forgiveness on a timeline. I did not promise the foundation would reverse, or that his name would return to the policy, or that the legal architecture Everett had built before dawn on a Wednesday would simply dissolve because he'd said sorry. Those things weren't off the table, but they weren't the point either. What I promised him was simpler and harder than any of that. I promised him the same thing his mother had made me promise her in that Cincinnati hospital room. That I would keep trying, that this family, fractured, humbled, honest with each other for perhaps the first time in years, was still worth the effort. I hung up, set the phone down on the table beside my orange juice, looked out the window at Columbus, gray, cold, completely unbothered by all of it, the way good cities are. Corinne, I thought, I think I kept the promise. Here is what I want to say before this story closes. I didn't leave that house at 5:30 in the morning to destroy my son. I didn't build the foundation or make the calls or write those 4 pages to win something. I did it because 63 years had taught me that the truth, left unspoken long enough, doesn't disappear. It just gets heavier, and eventually the weight of it breaks something, either you or everything around you. I chose everything around me. Elara is gone. That was her own doing, documented in her own voice on a recording she didn't know existed. I take no particular pleasure in that. You can't manufacture that kind of outcome. You can only make sure you're paying attention when it arrives. Sloane is rebuilding. Slowly. The Drake way. With too few words and too much coffee and a lot of sitting in silence that means more than either of us can properly say. Marcus and I have breakfast every other Saturday. The old diner. He orders the same thing every time. I let him. My daughter calls on Thursdays. My son in Portland is coming for Christmas. First time in 2 years. He's bringing his kids. The table is going to need both leaves again. Corinne's clock is on the nightstand in room 1104. For now. That's the sweet part, I think, when I lie there at night and listen to it tick. Not the revenge. The return.